It is Monday, December 6th at 6:30 p.m. This is a meeting of a regular school board meeting of the Winneconne Community School District. We are in the Winneconne Middle School large group lecture area. Meeting notices were sent to members of the press, members of the school board, and were posted on the front doors and/or in the vestibules of district school buildings. This is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public hearing. There may be a time for public comment as indicated in the agenda. The meeting will also be available to watch live at www.youtube.com/Winneconne. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Board members, roll call, please.
Stelzner, Ledoux,
Here.
Zeller,
Here.
Verich,
Here.
Ronk, Kunde here, Hansen.
Here. Recognizing the administrative team, Mr. Jarabek, Mr. Manier, Dr. Hughes, Mr. Cady, Mr. Schrader, Mr. Smith, Ms. Dodd, Mrs. Michaud, Mr. Whitford, and Mrs. Larson, and Mrs. Knapp. And if you are a visitor, I'm hoping that you signed in on the list up there at the table. If not, could you please do so? And at this time, we'll have the open forum. And Chelsea Morden, you are first up.
Hello, Chelsea Morden. I'm here today asking for a request and a policy change that you guys currently have. I've obviously been up here before and talked about some COVID-related items. Now that COVID has been in my family, I have a few different requests for you guys. The first thing that I'm going to ask is when a family receives a COVID positive test result, if they are in fact have seen a doctor and get a doctor's excuse for their children to return to school, I'm wondering if we can't change the policy that if a doctor has examined, talked to parents, talked to children, examined family members, and excused them to go back to school, why is the doctor's excuse to return to school not part of our policy anymore? Does that make sense?
From the COVID?
Correct. So another member of a family tests positive. Doctor says, as long as your children do not have any symptoms, they may return to school. But according to our policy, that's a close contact and they cannot return to school. So I believe since a doctor is telling family members that they can be at school, that's a valid reason why children can be at school. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it does, but probably not the best situation right now to get into all the details, but I'd like to learn more about
Sure.
what led to that point. And
Sure.
More, because there's a lot of intricacies that go into those
Right, and I
recommendations.
understand that. Every situation is going to be different. I am completely understanding and respectful of that. I just think that, that's what you do. You take your child to go see the pediatrician, you go to a doctor, you get a doctor's note, a doctor's excuse, and you can return to school. So I would like to see that as a policy change, and I would be more than willing to speak with you and talk with it more. And obviously, like I said, it's different for every situation. The other thing that I would like to request is then our family received the positive news, and I knew, even though the doctor said the children can go to school as long as they don't have symptoms, I knew our policy was different. So I emailed the nurses and let them know this is what's happening. So they emailed me back or called me back asked the dates, which the whole situation, dates, symptoms starting, all of those things are always very confusing, in my opinion. And not everybody goes to the doctor the first day symptoms start. And with COVID, sometimes they don't show up as normal symptoms. We don't know what things are. So anyways, there's different dates from when symptoms start, person goes to the doctor, test results are positive, et cetera, et cetera. So the nurses had a little bit of an issue with our dates. They were, not everything was right I don't know, it wasn't 2 days later or whatever they were expecting. Anyways, as we were talking to the school nurse, the questions that were asked to me were extremely upsetting to me. Now, granted, please understand that you're in a pandemic for 20 months and then all of a sudden it hits your home and you're probably a little high anxiety, to say the very least. But the questions that they are allowed to ask are invasive. They asked me how many bathrooms we have in our home, which I understand the point of it, but I don't think that that's a question that should be valid. They asked when the last time the person who was positive in my home kissed my children goodnight. And that depended on when they were able to return to school and get an education. And like I said, when you're at home and you have COVID in your home, you don't want to hear someone ask when the last time that you kissed your child was. It's just not something that somebody should be able to ask people. Also, the rules and regulations on isolation are a little ridiculous. If you are COVID positive but your other family members are not, you're not allowed to leave your bedroom. So you need to be in your bedroom. You can't go to the kitchen to get something to eat. You can't, again, use the same bathroom as your children. You can't shower in the same place that they're taking a bath. Did I mention the food? The food's a big one, in my opinion. You can't go to the kitchen to get yourself food because you have to isolate in your bedroom by yourself for 10 days. Even though your children are in the home with you because they can't be allowed in the school because they're quarantined. So what are people to do in these situations?
I do know that these are the CDC guidelines. We didn't make up these guidelines.
And I realize
and,
that.
It's going to be cumbersome. I mean, I had it, it's a pain, delivering food outside a child's door, and it's awful. But until, there's a better way, I don't know how we can go away from CDC guidelines.
So, in response to that, after we talked to the school nurse and she told us about not being able to go in the kitchen, not be able to sleep in the same bed, not be able to hug and kiss our kids goodnight, et cetera, our doctor called to check on us, and we relayed that information. And to say he was upset was an understatement. He said, "Are you feeling better?" And yes, we're feeling better. Then I need you up, walking around, eating, drinking, getting better. So isolation, when you're trying to rebuild your body, rebuild your strength, is not good anymore. Now you need to get up and move around your house, but the school district is telling us you can't. So there's how do you get healthy in your own
I mean,
home?
it sounds like there's some competing interests as far as the private provider.
Right.
And then the school trying to keep the kids that are in the household that are asymptomatic.
Right.
Keeping them that way and able
Right.
to come back to school. So that is difficult, I understand that. And again, it's hard to know all those details, and I'd love to talk to you afterwards.
Okay.
Thank
So,
you.
where do we go about policy changes from here, though?
Well, we'll have to either put it on an agenda, we can't talk about it right now. So we'll
Okay.
have to either put it on an agenda or bring it before our policy committee.
Okay. Can I be in on the information for that, so I know that this is happening. I would love a follow-up.
Let's have Dr. Zeller learn more from
Yeah.
you. I think I need clarification. I mean, I don't know exactly I'm so sorry. Let's get more clarification from Dr. Zeller, because
Okay.
we might be missing pieces, some perceptions might be different. And
Okay.
I just like to understand the whole picture before we,
Yeah, it'd be nice to be able to talk to the nurses too and see what they're asking. You know, and there very well may be better ways to ask things about, you know, how the people that are asymptomatic and negative are keeping isolated from those that
Right.
aren't. And,
Right.
you know, and if it is insensitive, you know, it should be addressed. You're right.
And let me be clear, I don't believe that the nurse who spoke to me was being insensitive. She could definitely tell that I was upset. She told me she didn't mean to upset me. I know that she was speaking out of policy. I understand. That's why I'm up here talking to you. I think that they've probably gotten yelled at a lot.
It's been a long 2 years for them.
And maybe if we loosen up on some of these things we're requiring them to ask, maybe their job becomes a little bit easier. And I think that's a win-win for everybody,
Okay,
you know? Make sense?
okay.
Makes
Yep,
sense.
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Susie Smith?
Hello, Susie Smith. Yes, mine's kind of policy related to, I would just like to see the vaccinated treated the same way as unvaccinated as far as home quarantines. Vaccinated people can get it and spread it just like unvaccinated people. So to hear that story, but if her kids or she would have been vaccinated, they could have all been back at school. So that's not right, because again, the vaccinated can get it and spread it just like it. So if we want to truly stop the spread, I would say vaccinated should quarantine also, or take it away for everybody. So I would like, again, that policy to, yes, be brought up to the board to be reviewed, or also, or whatever, however we need to do that, just to relook at it, I guess. But I do think if we want to stop the spread, I know that's not a CDC guideline, but like I said, the vaccinated are getting it, and they're spreading it just as much. So, thank you.
Adam, Aaron's? I'm sorry? You sure? Okay. All right, I will close the open forum and entertain a motion for consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ledoux, second by Kundi to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion by the board? Roll call, please.
Stelzner. Ledoux.
Aye.
Zeller.
Aye.
Verich.
Aye.
Kundi, aye. Hanson.
Aye. Models of learning and the learning plan, Dr. Larson.
you have the updated data in front of you. Elementary was able to return to mask optional today, so we were glad for that option to exist. Otherwise, no changes at this time.
Okay. Thank you. State report card, Mr. Smith.
Good evening, everybody. As we take a look at our state report card, I think it's an opportunity for us to, I think, have a pretty big celebration and a huge kudos, I think, to everyone who's involved in our entire district, from the staff to the students to all of our community members. Every single person involved. There isn't a person who's in this room or outside of this room who didn't have an impact in some way for our report card that comes out today. So a huge, I think, kudos to everyone. I'm going to focus just on our district report card with you guys here tonight. If you have questions about this or any individual ones, I mean, we could go on for 10 plus hours if you really want to get into the weeds of it. But I'll try to get this, I'd say, nice and quick in about 5 minutes here. And if you have a ton of questions, I'm more than willing to meet with anybody that includes community members as well to kind of look at any of the report cards. A couple of quick highlights. As I said, we're going to look at the district report card. In a note I'd written to the board a couple of weeks ago, you cannot compare, is what I wrote to them, the previous report cards to the ones we have now. And the biggest reason being is there's 25% of how the score is calculated is different. they added on there now what's called a target group outcome. And in the past, that was a different score. And there's a lot of discussion over the past 2 years from the DPI as to that category. It used to be called closing gaps. And there were schools that saw huge fluctuations in their scores based on when some students were kind of moving in or out, or how their 5-year trend impacted that. So the DPI decided what they're hoping is a more reliable score that can be on the report card, give schools more useful information, because one of the goals of the DPI is to give us something we can use to potentially help impact instruction. And so that's where they created then that target group outcome. They got rid of the other one, just deleted it off entirely. And as you see on our district report card, it's an 82 out of 100 we got for that one. And that is measuring, what they do is they target the bottom 25% of students. For this one, they targeted them back in 18-19. How did our bottom 25% do? They call that your target group. And then how do they do over the 2 years from the one report card essentially to the next? And how are they growing? And the celebration for us is our target group. You don't see it on the page you probably have in front of you, but as a district, we ranked the 96th percentile in the state for how we did with what was considered our target group of students, which I think is a huge celebration. When you're taking a look at that, it's saying, how are you supporting and helping the students who are scoring in the bottom 25%? And that's for your district. That's not of the state, that's for your district. And so then, as you know, each of our buildings has a target group of their bottom 25%. But for our district, it really is who are the bottom 25% in our district. Instead, we scored in the 96th percentile, which is a huge celebration. Our achievement score, which you see is an 83.1 there, that scored in the 95th percentile for the state, which I think is also really impressive when you take a look at, we are directly compared against schools where, for example, they take all of their kids who score in the 99th percentile and put them into a same school. There are certain districts that have schools like that. So the fact that we score in the 95th percentile for achievement is really exciting. For growth, that's where we scored in the 77th percentile. Also, I think a point of celebration to see how we're moving our kids over those course of the 2 years. And the last one, the on-track to graduation, that was also in the 96th percentile. So to have 3 of them above 95%, I think was really impressive. Yes?
For that growth that you just mentioned, does that take out the target groups, or is that all growth?
That's all of our students. That includes them. And so then when you look at, for those of you who have it in front of you, when you look at the growth of the whole school, then you look at, on the bottom left, that target group, they kind of get like a mini report card. So that's where you see the target group has achievement, growth, absenteeism, and graduation. So they're kind of creating a mini report card for them. So, I mean, sometimes it's really informative to see how is your target group growing compared to all of your students. And sometimes there's some interesting decisions you can make based on how those students are growing relative to everyone else. Like I said, it's a huge celebration. Also, you have in front of you, we tied with, is it Holy Land area? Holy Hill area for the #1 district report card in our area, which is also a huge celebration for us. I live by what's always called the Holy Land of Fond du Lac. That's why I think I always get it confused. You know, if you're a Fond du Lac person, you know all about the Holy Land, okay? So I think that's probably why I stuck there, but what's that? Yes, it's a K-8, and that's the other thing is that's a K-8 district, which does not have a high school report card. And a lot of high school report cards have some tougher scores, and that you see across the state. So it's always an interesting thing. So for that one not to have it, and we tied them as a district, it's a huge celebration, like I said, and a huge kudos to everyone. And then the one celebration for individual school, it is important to note that our middle school does have the top 6th through 8th grade middle school report card score in the entire state of Wisconsin. So the fact that we have the #1 middle school is a huge celebration. And so I know our middle school doesn't like to be singled out, but I don't think we can not single out that note. So I think that's a huge celebration. But as I said, I'd be willing to meet with you and go through all of the details. There's a ton of data and a ton of time we could spend. Do you have any questions off the top of your head, though, before we jump in?
I don't have a question. I just, a huge, huge congratulations and thank you to all of our educators. They work tirelessly, and they really put their heart and soul into what they do. And just a huge thank you for them, because without them, we would not be in this position right now.
I agree. I think this is an awesome reflection of what goes into educating our students, and thanks to the administration, the teaching staff, the custodians, whoever is involved. It's just a great group effort, and it reflects very positively on the district.
Excellent. Thank you.
And the parents and students, too.
I love it when these things come through, because, you know, you always have this subjective feeling of pride and like, we got this great school. But then when you have objective numbers and things to put to it, that just kind of gives some meat to that feeling. It's just a great feeling, and again, like they said, it's just credit to the work that you all do. It's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Security survey.
Yes, we had a security survey done by our local Winneconne PD. It's in conjunction with the DOJ grant that we received a couple years back. However, I just feel it's good policy too to have them come and review the district. So in your packet, you can see there are some lighting concerns and some other minor details, and I know Steve has addressed what he is able to address as far as projects. There are certain things we can't just do right now, but again, it is good information, and we continue to learn from that report.
So you want some kind of
Yes,
and what exactly are we approving?
just the report from the PD, just giving acceptance, because for our grant, we need to show the DOJ that the board did review this.
Oh, okay.
So I move to accept this report put forth on security, put forth by the Village of Winneconne Police.
I'll second.
Motion by Verich, second by Zeller to accept the security survey report as presented. Any questions?
I do have a question. I noted about the lighting issue in the parking lot after midnight, and I get why it's not feasible to do that. Is there any way in the future, maybe just to have a single light in there or do something that is feasible? Just, because I've noticed, I remember one year, Drew Bricosa had a play, and it was in the summer, and there was zero lighting on in that parking lot. And that was 9 o'clock at night, and that was pretty scary. So
Yes, as we look to renovate, tear apart, whatever our parking lot, that's definitely of concern. And I think there are some lighting things at the elementary too, some of the entrances that we're looking at doing some things too, because we recognize what the report is saying and want to make sure we provide a safe environment for everybody.
Peggy, I have one quick question as well. I know that we've applied for this other times, and we approve this, I believe, is it every year or every
Third.
3 years? What else is in for some of the requests as far as we have to follow, other than approve this from the police officer for our...
For the DOJ grant?
Right.
Oh, I have a list for you.
I know that we had like, what, a 100-page list or 100 different items other years, and...
Wait, well, I'm sorry. Are you asking what requirements were required to do it in order to
Correct.
maintain that grant? Can't remember them off the top of my head, but we have to make sure our maps are up to date. This needs to be done. You'll see the next board meeting that you'll have to approve how we addressed our safety protocols with Alice. So that'll be on your agenda for the next meeting. There's a couple other things too, and they're all cyclical, so.
And as I remember, we put in a number of items of requests, but generally, of course, we'd be lucky to get what we get, and we're glad to get what we get as far as any kind of grant for our district. So following this, as far as the review and analysis, it does tell us that when we do look, as we mentioned earlier, for updating our parking lot, that most likely we will be looking at some of the lighting and the structure and so on, according to this report as well.
Anything else from the board? Roll call, please.
Aye.
Zeller.
Aye.
Verich.
Aye.
Kundi, Stelzner. Hanson.
Aye. 2022-23 school calendar. Dr. Larson?
Sure. You have in your packet a draft of the proposed school calendar as well as the minutes of instruction at each of our buildings. Our district leadership team did have the ability to contact their colleagues to get some input, and eventually this is what was brought forward to our group, and we brought it forward to policy, and now it's in your lap.
As the policy committee, when we reviewed this, we did discuss the actual instructional time. As most of us remember years back, how it was based on a 180-day school year, and now we're looking at instructional hours in time. And how we've got it broke down and listed there was one thing that we, as a committee, definitely wanted to make sure we had in there for the rest of the board and so on to look at, to understand our actual instructional minutes and so on within our grade levels.
Any motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Motion by Kundi, second by Verich to approve the 22-23 school year calendar. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Zeller.
Aye.
Verich. Kundi, aye. Stelzner.
Aye.
Ledoux.
Aye.
Hanson.
Aye. And then because of the new year, we are looking at having just one board meeting in January, which would be scheduled for January 17th. I would need a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Ledoux, second by Verich to approve the one board meeting in January for January 17th, 2022. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Verich.
Aye.
Kundi, aye. Stelzner.
Aye.
Ledoux.
Aye.
Zeller.
Aye.
Hanson.
Aye. And the policies for the policy committee.
Okay. All right. First of all, I certainly want to thank our policy committee, Jackie and Becky and myself. We have put a lot of time into these policies, and there has been a few questions. And as we go through this, where some of the X's and blocks or options and so on need to be, or if any of you have questions, please, stop, or if we have to ask Don as well, or Lauren here, if there's questions with some of these policies, certainly do. So we appreciate that, and we'll move through these. There's quite a bit to go through, so again, jump up and fight for joy if you got questions. 'Cause,
Mark, before you get started, are these policies a result of a recent change in law, or I guess where are they deriving from? Are they were they motivated by the policy committee or some other driving force?
all of our policies within our district and so on, we work with Neola as far as our updates, whether it's state statutes or district recommendations. As we go through these policies with change of review and language and verbiage is when we have to bring them forward for revision and update according to when Neola and the statutes change.
Okay,
So not
was-
driven by the committee.
Okay, so there's been a statutory change as to why these are
Correct.
changing. Okay.
And as you may have looked through the last of every policy, whether they're stricken or not or added, it does show you any statute change within the policies. Thank you for the question. The first policy then that we'll address is policy number 1422, non-discrimination and equal employment opportunity. On 11A, on the first page of this policy, there's just one thing I want to point out for understanding, and that is that school district community means students and board employees, including administrators, professional and support staff, as well as board members, agents, volunteers, contractors, and other persons subject to control and supervision of the board. So that's mainly the understanding of when we go through these policies, what school district community means. As we move through the first policy on 11A1, on the bottom of that policy where it states on the school district's website and a number of other letters to be checked, we also need to check in the staff handbooks for this policy. And for each of these policies, as we go through, you'll notice that the board has designated following individuals to serve as the district compliance officers, which they are Don Smith as well as Lauren Dodd, and they need to be one male and one female, at least with every officership within the district. As we go through 11-2, if there's any questions, otherwise as a committee, yes.
So are all of these policies now going to be in the staff handbooks? Or are you just going to refer to where they can be accessed?
Good question.
Good point, yes. The ones that the policy committee has required to be in our handbooks will now be in our handbooks. It's, the
gonna be
handbook
a-
is an election that people chose to put in there.
And part of the policies that may be designated says that they need to be part of the handbook as well.
Some of them, yes.
Yes, that's what I'm
Yes.
saying.
It does get cumbersome, I'm not gonna lie.
How big
I
is
have
this
a
handbook
list.
gonna get?
Yeah.
I have a list. Well, everybody here knows my list. It's on our current handbook, what needs to be added for next year, so, but we will do that. Even, policies are online, people can see them all the time, but we will certainly do whatever the committee would like.
Does our staff, do they actually get a physical handbook or is it electronic?
It's electronic, and then they have to sign in the beginning of the year saying they received it and read it.
Could we just do like a hyperlink to the policy? Would that be
Oh,
easier?
yeah, absolutely,
absolutely.
yeah. But it still needs to be in the handbook.
Okay. 11-3. Any questions on that page? Otherwise, we'll keep moving through this. Down on the bottom, option 1 is checked. Although certain cases may require additional time, the community officers or designee will attempt to complete an investigation into the allegations of harassment based on protected class or retaliation within 15 days of receiving formal complaint. 11-4. We have a check mark on the compliance officer may consult with board attorney during the course of investigatory process and or before finalizing the report to the district administrator. As well as we move on down through under that, a check mark is in the compliance officer may, in the consultation with district administrator or board president, if the matter involves the district administrator, engage the outside legal to conduct the investigation consistent with the policy. And we had one other one, correct me if I'm wrong, Jackie or Becky, as we go about 3/4, not quite down the page, where there was a check mark in a decision of the district administrator shall be final, or did we decide on the complainant or respondent? Okay, so the check mark on this page, particular to the policy, would be in the second where it says or the complainant or the respondent, as we read through, instead of the decision of the district administrator shall be final. 11A5, any questions? 11A6, 11A7. As we go through the PQRSTU, there are no check marks in any of them. And on this policy here, as you see where there's crossed out statutes as well, that's where the statutes would have changed, maybe to answer your question, Jill. And the final page then lists the constitutional amendments and so on. Okay, policy number 1422-02, and as we go through this, we're going to ask for one motion for approval unless there's any other questions as we get done. Okay, on 1422-02, the check mark is in the board recognizes. 11B1, again, on the bottom, 3/4 down the page, the board offers health services, and then actually as well, including wellness program. Policy 1623, 11C, 11C1, 11C2, again, where it's listed, the school's district's website as well as in staff handbook. 11C3, 11C4, 11C5, Just one point on this one is that the education and training in support of this policy, the board promotes preventative educational measures to create greater awareness. That is an added piece to that. 11C6, and we did ask Peggy on this as far as annually as well as new hires. This is reviewed. Policy 1662, 11D, about 3/4 of the way down, a check mark, the district will offer counseling services to any person found to have been subjected to harassment. There is a check in that box. 11D1, 11D2. If there's any questions as we're going, please stop. Otherwise, we're going to try to move through this with the questions that can come up. 11D3 on boundary invasions. Any questions on that at all? That box is checked. 11D4. 11D5, and you may have noticed that our compliance officer here listed is Peggy Larson and Don Smith. It does need to be Lauren Dodd as well as Don Smith, not Peggy Larson. No disrespect.
None taken.
And as well as we go through the policy on below as far as the school district's website and as well the handbook.
I just need to go back.
yep.
I apologize.
No problem.
On the boundary invasions.
Okay.
And I get it, but one of the inappropriate boundary invasions includes hugging a student. I don't know what the policy is in the or the elementary school, but I would imagine there's a lot of kiddos in that school who probably need a hug every so often. And I don't think, it's such a tough call, and I don't think that that's a good thing to put, that hugging a student is not a good thing, or that's inappropriate. I don't know, I struggle with that language. I understand why it's in there, but I don't know if there's some way to exclude hugging or adjust that language so that it is okay. I don't know.
Is that something we can check with Neola on?
Sure.
And
I'm just reading the paragraph above, too.
Yeah, it's kind of vague
It's
leading up to it.
Yeah, inappropriate invasions
Right.
may include but are not
Not limited.
limited to the following. It also says when they're taken too far.
I think we can understand the gist that they're getting at, but
my concern is you put hugging in there and you get anyone who has a beef with Peggy Larson, Lisa Hughes, a teacher, and they said, your teacher hugged my student, and point to this policy. It's too much of a gray area, and,
yeah, I agree with you.
yeah.
I mean, I
so-
think they'd have to prove it's inappropriate, but I definitely see where you're coming from. I struggle taking it out, too.
Well, I agree,
So,
I agree.
Let me check with Neola to see if there's something, or maybe I can get creative too and send them something saying, is this acceptable to add to this? So let me do that, please.
Yeah,
And do look at that, Peggy, because in all of our policy, there is, of course, the process for reporting and so on in each of the policies. So are we going to hold this then for the next board to hear back from Neola? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. Alrighty. D6. 11D7. 11D8. 11D9, about halfway through the policy as we see the check mark in option 2.
And why was that changed from option 1 as what was in a previous?
And this was a question that I had as a committee as well. Did we decide to go with the option 1 instead of 2 all the way across the policies, or, we did discuss that as far as timeline being listed and so on.
Yeah, Peggy had mentioned that she would like the flexibility of option 2 versus the 15-day.
Versus the 15-day, yes,
Yes.
with this particular policy.
Well, I think with all that we've been looking at.
Okay,
Well, option 1 was on that line,
right, option 1.
was on the, was
on-
in a previous policy.
Yeah, and then we discussed it, and she said maybe I just incorrectly checked that box, and she was hoping that it would, like, across the board for all of these policies, to have the greater flexibility of time.
So they all should be option 2 then?
Option 2, yes.
And then 3/4 are just about all the way through on the bottom of that policy. The check mark in the compliance officer may consult with the board's attorney during the course of the investigatory process and/or before finalizing the report to the district administrator. 11D11. 11D12. About 3/4 of the way down as well, if the complainant has been a victim of criminal conduct and accused, we do have such knowledge should be reported to the compliance officer to local enforcement. After such report has been made, the board president shall be advised that local enforcement was notified. (7D12), and the very first part, a check mark is in the first, a link to this policy shall be available upon request of employees and other interested parties. 7D13, 14, and on to policy number 2260, non-discrimination and access to equal opportunity educational opportunity. 11E, 11E1, 11E2. We just had one question for clarification, and that was 3/4 of the way down, a district administrator shall attempt annually to identify children with disabilities ages 3 to 22. And just above that, that is a check mark in the new language. The board is committed to educating in that paragraph. And 11E3 as well, the compliance officer should be listed as Lauren, and not Peggy Larson, along with Don Smith. 11E4, 11E5. This one, the first check mark is about 1/4 of the way down is the compliance officer may consult with the board's attorney during the course of investigatory process and/or before finalizing the report to the district administrator is checked. As well, the next paragraph, the compliance officer may, in consultation with the district administrator. And about 2 paragraphs down further, the decision of the district administrator shall be final. Did we want that one changed as well, reviewed by the board upon request?
I think we should keep it consistent.
Okay, and that's what we had in the first ones, is the board upon request.
Yes, we were making that change across the
Okay,
board with the
just wanted
policies.
to make sure I had it checked right as well.
Yep.
Okay. 11E6. 11E7. Yes.
I just have a question on the compliance officer contacting the attorney. Is that something that would be discussed with you, Dr. Larson, before it occurs?
Yes, provided it's not me who's being accused of something.
Okay,
Yes, I would be in the loop. But again, just like you, I can't know all the facts of every detail because if it were
Right.
to come to me, but yes.
yes, but I just want to make sure that there's
I believe
a
there's
checks and balances in place for attorney
Yes.
contact.
I believe in another policy, I apologize for not knowing it off the top of my head, but it essentially says people need to go through me to contact the attorney. Like,
Okay.
And-
Todd just couldn't call whomever, you know.
Yeah.
And I know I recall what you're talking about, Peg, but what, if it's something involving you though, then do they go to the
Yes,
board
and that's,
president?
I feel like we just reviewed
That-
that policy too, or is it coming
Yeah,
up?
that's-
We've had a
Okay.
lot of policy reviews, so I apologize which group is which, but that's
Yes.
definitely in there. Actually, I think it might have been in one of these. this
Yes,
group.
it is.
Talks about if something is in regards to me, the board president is contacted.
Yes, yeah.
And if it's something in regards to Donna, the vice, it has that chain of command. in it.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Yes.
As well, when you have the compliance officers listed as Lauren and Don instead of Peggy and Don and so on, because it comes to the final at most point to Peggy, and she's pretty much kept out of a lot of it until it gets to the point of the ending outcomes and so on, specifically because of the conflict and so on and so forth, of the knowledge and so on of all of the discussion, so that the decision can be made either non-biased or, and so on as we go through these policies. 11E6, 11E7, 11E8, policy number 2260, section 504 ADA, prohibition against discrimination based on disability. A lot of new language here in the beginning. 11F1, in the second paragraph, you can see where the box is checked there as well. 11F2, 11F3, 11F4, 11F5, and as well to Donna's question, just about to the end of this policy where option 1 or 2, and it's consistent to be option 2 in this policy as well, on the time for the investigation and so on shall be completed promptly. 11F6, about halfway through this policy, where it starts, if the district administrator requests additional investigation. I wanted to make sure that we understood where it says, the decision of the district administrator will be reviewed by the board upon request. That's consistent then as well with the policies. That box is checked. (11.7), 11.8, 11.9, 11.10, and that is the policies for tonight's approval, minus the one that we had some question on.
I do have another point in the matter of consistency I'd like to address. I noticed.
Can you let us know, Jackie, where we're at, or if it's in a specific policy, please? Thank
It's
you.
in- Yes, like where it says on the school district's website, and we marked in the staff handbooks on a lot of them. Then that one where we decided to pull out, it says a link.
Which one are we on, please,
That
Jackie?
one would be 11D12. It says a link will be made to, in the employee handbook. So is it a staff handbook or an employee handbook? Are there two handbooks? And one does say it would be in the staff handbook, or the other one does say it would just be a link. So which one is the employee one and which one is the staff one?
I consider employee everybody, so it'd be both, the teacher handbook and the support staff handbook. Is there an employee? They're all employees.
Okay, because it does separate them. One, it's just in the staff handbook, and the other one, it's in the.
Well, staff, I would consider the same thing.
Employee handbook.
I consider staff all of our employees, if it was specific to teacher or
Well, that was
professional.
my question, it's just not consistent.
You can change it if you'd like.
No, I was just, you were bringing up other things that weren't consistent, and I wanted it to be the same.
I think it's covered in the definition at the, I'm trying to get to it. There's a definition early on in these policies.
The community, school community definition. That was on the first page. The school district community means students and board employees.
Right, but it says, and board employees, I mean,
So are staff and employee one and the same?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, it just says one is getting an employee handbook and the other one's getting a staff handbook.
Okay, is there any other questions? Otherwise, that's the presentation. Excluding the one policy, was it 1662?
All right, we're going to hold on that one.
Correct.
I move to accept these changes to the policies as discussed, however, accepting policy number 1662 from approval with further
Verification?
thank you very much. Yes,
On
clarification.
boundary invasion. Clarification on boundary invasion?
Yeah.
Yes, on hugging.
Second.
Motion by Verich and second by Kundi to approve policy 1422, 1422.02, policy 1623, policy 2260, policy 2260.01 as presented, and then just with that change in 1422 for that option 2 will need to be addressed. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Kundi, aye. Stelzner?
Aye.
Ledoux?
Aye.
Zeller? Verich?
Aye.
Hanson?
Aye. Administrative reports, anything to add from the administration? Anything from the board? I'd like to congratulate Mrs. Michaud. I understand she's completed her doctorate degree. Congratulations. Board reports, any communications?
I have none.
Committee reports, HR, nothing. Financial planning. The Financial Planning Committee met to discuss the upcoming potential referendum, which we will be coming to with a final recommendation at the December next meeting, December 16th, what, no, that's not right. 20th. We got a little bit of an update from Myron. We had to increase our supply amount by about 3%. 3%. And secondly, we are recommending to not proceed with the operational referendum, the 240,000 operating costs. Jill, do you have anything to add?
No, that sounds correct.
Okay. So we'll be coming to you with final numbers at the next meeting.
Donna, just a quick question on, you indicated you increased, is that the inflation, inflated, they had figured 4 to 5%, I believe.
That's in addition.
So that's in addition to the inflated over the years from now until the time we actually would start to build. So that's an increase of another percent.
That's due to the increase in raw materials that we've seen since spring of 2020. So
Okay.
it's not going down really.
So that's in addition to the inflation or the inflated costs that we naturally would see. They came with an additional increase that they thought they better put in, okay.
Correct.
So is that like around what, 40?
47.8 was the approximate figure that we're looking at this point.
Okay. And just one other quick question. You've indicated that the 240,000 operational that we've had in referendum, when you did take a look at this, they did point out the additional, if any, cost of operation over and above with that dollar figure of referendum is also been talked on.
Yes.
Because that's always one thing when we've built that we definitely want to keep in mind, or we've kind of fell short on as far as operations.
Keep in mind the efficiency in the middle school. If that were to go through, the efficiency of this building would become much, much better, greater, or than it currently is. And there's no change to the elementary or high school buildings as far as operations. We feel, and I think we should just point out too, we feel right now, today, we don't need the operational referendum. We don't know what the budget holds in 2023. The state gives us our budget every 2 years. We can only plan for 2 years. If something catastrophic were to happen in the future, we may need to go back and ask for that operations, but right now, today, we are okay.
And most likely, building won't start if we pass for 2 years. Is that what we figured for timeline?
A year
or-
for design.
Yeah.
Mr. Bell.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Public relations and marketing,
Nothing at this time.
okay, and policy.
Oh, we'll have some more policy coming next meeting.
Okay,
And we do have a policy meeting tonight after this meeting.
fun, okay. Motion to move into executive session.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Ledoux, second by Joe, by Verich, to move into executive session under state statute 19.85 to approve executive session minutes from November 1st and November 15th, and also Wisconsin statute 1985 sub 1 sub F and 118.125 to discuss social or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, as well as strategies relating to addressing the same, including avoiding similar situations moving forward, which, if discussed in public, would likely have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of those discussed. The board will move into open session and may take action on items discussed in closed session. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Stelzner, Ledoux,
Aye.
Zeller, Verich,
Aye.